Hello, welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. I am your host, and today I am actually in Toronto and have a guest who I met last time I was here in Canada. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was at a conference called Fireside, and it was actually where I did my first live podcast with Michael, if you guys go back and listen to that one about Sick Not Weak. And this wonderful guest today was the keynote speaker at the Fireside event, and he's a musician. He works with children as a mentor, just really like such an authentic man, and expresses his vulnerability in so many different ways, and honestly just is an amazing, wonderful human. And I'm so happy to be here with him today. So without further ado, hello, Peter. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. It's been quite a journey for us to get to this point. We've bounced around a little bit today, which again, like I'm always so thankful for the people that I record with, because it's always such like an understanding relationship. I was a little underprepared, thought I was prepared. There's been some schedule changes, but really appreciate your understanding and just go with the flow of it all.
My pleasure. And look at where we ended up.
Yeah.
Not that you can see it, but
I'll post some stories of it so you guys can see. But yeah, beautiful view of Toronto and the water, and just it's a beautiful day here, honestly. And I want to kind of go back a little bit to where we met. We met at Fireside, which you guys have heard me talk about a little bit. In the episode with Vanessa, we kind of plugged your talk a little bit and shared like how emotional it made us and how great it was. And so now you're finally here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. And so you do like so many different things, and there's so many places we could take this episode. And one thing I want to maybe kind of start off with is what we started off our interaction today with, which was the bubbles of calmness.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, as I said to you when I first arrived, I was just running from a million different things. My new album's getting mastered today, and I've been trying to buy a place too, which is a crazy thing in the city, and just so many things happening all at once. And so I was referencing a hero of mine, this man named Oliver Schroer, who is this Canadian violin player. And I heard this interview with him once, and he was promoting this show that he was going to play that he called Oliver's Last Show on his tour of this planet, because he had terminal cancer diagnosis, and he only had a few months left to live. And so he decided that he was going to play this one final show, and I just really kind of followed him in the process. He was blogging about the last few months of his life, and one of the things that he said in one of his blog entries was that, you know, if he thought about the totality of the things that he wanted to do, because he wanted to record all this music and you know, visit with all these people, it was just too overwhelming to think of the totality of it. So he just sort of coined this vision, or this phrase of these bubbles of calmness. So you just move from one bubble to calmness to the next throughout your day. And so like, okay, right now I'm recording music, and then right now I'm talking to Taylor, and then right now I'm talking to a real estate agent and trying to understand what the heck they're saying. But you're just like, you just go from one thing to the next and just kind of show up fully present for it. I've used that image ever since, you know, and even at, you know, Fireside where we met, I just was putting a lot of pressure on myself, but you're also like meeting all these people. So I knew I wanted like to prep for my talk, but I also wanted to be present with people. So I just kind of moved from these bubbles of calmness. Yeah.
I love that, because it actually puts like some imagery to being present, where you can like literally envision like each little bubble is like each little interaction or event or meeting or, you know, whatever you got going on, and just kind of like being right in that. Is beautiful image.
Yeah, I kind of picture, you know, like like if you're in the like a back of a limo or something, there's that little window that goes up. You're like, you're like, which is totally rude towards the driver. Not that I'm in the back of limos all the time, but it's like it's not a regular occurrence. But you're like, okay, just like putting up the walls, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
This is my bubble now.
Yeah. I love that. It's a really, I think, very helpful tool
right.
In terms of like coping with stress, and mental health is something we oftentimes talk about on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of why your talk was so impactful for so many people, because it just was so vulnerable and so authentic, and just had these layers that were so real that everyone could relate to on some level. You shared a little bit about your divorce, and then some of this work that you do with mentoring kids, and would love for you to share some of that here, not to totally repeat your whole speech or anything, but just some of those little parts of you and how they've like impacted your mental health.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start with the more fun one, which is like the work I do with the kids. I guess the condensed version of that story is I was booked to play this show about 6 years ago in this small town out in Alberta. Never heard of this town before, and wasn't expecting anybody to be there. And 300 people showed up in this beautiful theater and knew all of my music, and I was sort of scratching my head like, what happened? And anyways, turns out that there was this 12-day program for youth where they take them out into the mountains, and they go hiking and rock climbing and whitewater canoeing, but they don't really care if they get good at hiking and rock climbing and whitewater canoeing. It's about doing things that you're afraid of, and pushing yourself, and developing empathy by taking care of each other. And it's free for they're all teenagers. They're all like 15, 16. And it's free for them because they're earning high school credits.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. But in order to earn the credits, there needs to be a curriculum. And so the curriculum is like an emotional curriculum. And in order to anchor the learning, they had been using my songs, unbeknownst to me. And anyways, long story short, I played the show. It was incredible. I met these people that ran it, and they invited me to come work for them. And now I go out there and I run the program for a month every summer, and it's kind of the best thing that I do. And it's interesting, just to get back to like mental health. I tend to have a really kind of a hyperactive mind, and I had this incredible moment my first summer at Faces, that's the name of the camp, where none of that experience is about me, and so much of my career as a musician is all about me. It's like I'm in the photos, I'm in the videos, it's like it's my voice,
your self-expression.
But it's also like I'm like there's kind of like there's me, and then there's also the me as a commodity, where I'm there, when I was working with the kids, I didn't think about myself for a second. I just met these young people, and within a nanosecond of meeting them, I was like, oh my gosh, I care about you so much. Like, I want to serve you. And I had this moment where I lay down in my tent on like the third day, and I had just been, doing these like 18-hour days, and just threw myself in this experience. And I lay down in my tent, and I realized, like, for the first time in as long as I could remember, there was silence in my mind. And it was deafening. Because I realized that there had just been constant chatter there for a decade. And then the experience of like outwardly putting someone else first and giving them my care and my love and my focus allowed my own brain to just calm down, which is, it was like, it almost didn't make sense because it was so busy, but that was such a moment of aha for me. And that like part of my mental health is actually not making it all about me all the time. Yeah.
Well, because it allows you to like step outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, you're being present with people in a totally different way when you do that, and B, there is such a wonderful feeling to care for someone else.
Yeah.
And I don't think I like to generalize that and say that's like to all humans.
Right.
And I think just some more than others. Like I know for me, like I'm a very, very nurturing, caring person. So like when I can give love to someone else, it makes me feel so much fuller, and definitely allows me to like step outside of my thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there was something like deep that clicked in me too with their age range, because they're all like 15 years old, 15, 16.
Yeah.
And that's like around when my parents got divorced. And I think since my parents got divorced, like that's what sort of sent me on this, like I ended up moving out. Like I lived on my own by the time I was 16. And I think from that moment, I've always been trying to prove that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And like to the point of maybe like taking that to like sort of a compulsion level. And so working with kids at that age, I feel like immediately connected to them, because there's something about my 15-year-old self that it's like I almost get an opportunity to give the love that I kind of needed at that time that maybe I didn't get. And so it's like by giving them that love, I'm kind of giving myself that love too. So there was something super special about that too.
Yeah, I think it's a very common thing whenever we experience some kind of trauma or significant life event that perhaps doesn't really receive the level of attention and healing that it needs, that then later on in our lives, we find ourselves in these situations where we're then healing our younger self at that point in trauma. There was very similar to your experience here, an episode I did a while back with actually a listener of the episode or of the show. She experienced sexual abuse in her family from her brother, and is now getting her PhD in school psychology and is working with children that are between 9 and 12 years old. And those are the same ages where she was experiencing abuse in her family. And so by working with that population of kids, it's healing for her, and it's also allowing to like, it's a different level of connection, I think, because you relate so much, like you're able to give more to these kids than maybe you would have if you wouldn't have been able to maybe relate to something that they could be going through. They could also be going through divorce in their family, or just maybe giving that little bit of extra love and attention that like is healing for you to give because it's what you would have needed or wanted.
Yeah.
It's crazy how we do that. Sometimes like we don't even notice that we're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that is exactly right. I just was kind of thrown into the situation. When they asked me to come work for them, I remember thinking like, oh, there's going to be like a staff training or something like that. And I arrive and I get off the bus and there's 40 kids there. I was like, oh, we're starting, and then a few hours later, I'm like in a room with my small group. There's 4 small group leaders, and you have about 10 students that are kind of your little group within the larger group. And I'm just sitting there, and they're staring at me, and I'm staring at them, and I knew exactly what to do, which is funny because like it's like a job. This job existed that I had no idea I was perfectly qualified for, and I want to give credit to like people that do that work professionally, and like I've learned a lot over the last 6 years, and I've become better at that work. And there's a lot of people most of the people I work with there are teachers, and they are more qualified than I am, and I've learned a lot from them. But
it felt like natural.
It felt so natural to me, like the most natural thing in the world. So
yeah, that's amazing. I love that you do that because it's another piece of your identity. Like you're a musician, but then you also kind of have this like other side, and it is interesting how you talked about it at the beginning, where you're like, yeah, music is really about me,
right?
And then you're doing this totally opposite thing of just like giving so much.
And of course, like in my music, I really care about the audience, and I'm trying to give them a great experience, and all of that is hugely important to me. And what I do doesn't really exist without that interaction and that connection. But a lot of writing and creating for me is like you do it because you have to, like not like you have to make money, but you like it's inside of you and you have to get it out.
Yeah, you're like a very all throughout not only your work but also just as I know you as a person, like very like reflective,
right?
Like pretty consistently processing what's going on and like reflecting on what you're going through.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, when you were younger, when your parents got divorced, did you receive any kind of therapy during that time?
It's interesting because my mom is the therapist.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I got lots of secret therapy.
Secret therapy.
But I was super resistant to it.
Yeah.
My mom offered to help send me to someone, and it was always kind of on the table, and I was super resistant to it. I only started seeing a therapist going through my own divorce, and then I've continued seeing that same therapist post-divorce. So
and that's been how long?
That's been just over 3 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, because even just with your career with doing music, like that in and of itself can be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of processing and expression there. And even your work with the kids seems to be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was curious if that had been something that you had done back then, but I'm glad that you were able to find that.
Yeah, for sure.
Now.
And truthfully, there can also be a disconnect sometimes between, obviously, I've made this new record in the last 3 years, and my divorce and the loss of my house and all these things are throughout that record. But there can be a disconnect sometimes between, sort of the show must go on, and so, I've been touring, and you go out on stage, and sometimes it's like some of the saddest moments for me over the last 3 years were playing a show for hundreds of people, and it's amazing, and you're so connected, and then everybody goes home, and then I'm by myself, and I'm putting stuff in my car, and there was several distinct moments where I then got into my car, and I was like, where am I driving? I didn't have a home anymore. I didn't have a partner anymore. And I was just and those were my lowest lows, were after these highest highs. So it's a bit of a tricky thing, I think, in this career too, of yes, it's connected and it's amazing, but it's you almost you give everything you have, and then everybody takes that with them, which is great. And then, but if you don't have your own kind of nucleus of support that you're nurturing and sense of home, it can be really isolating. And so I guess, doing the work that I do, with the youth or that kind of stuff, or that's been a little more grounding for me, because it feels more it's real life too, not that my music career isn't, but there's just a bit of a difference for me in the ways that it feeds me. So,
I can see that.
Yeah.
And I want to maybe shed some light on this area, as it's not something that we've really ever got into before on the pod. A little bit. Kit, my co-host, has been divorced, but you were in a pretty significant relationship. You were in a relationship for 12 years. You were married, and then experienced a lot of loss after that. And that's a lot of what your last album was about, and a lot of what your speech was about at Fireside.
Yeah.
So would you mind sharing a little bit? Would you be open to sharing a little bit about kind of how that relationship kind of resulted in divorce, and how that impacted not only your music but your mental health, and just what kind of impact that's had on you? I mean, a pretty significant one. Yeah,
definitely. I guess I haven't really spoken about it too much, and I guess with everything there's two sides of the story, so I understand that. My experience of it was, I thought, for the first 10 years, I just thought I had won the lottery. I was like, we got this. We're winning at relationship and marriage.
Yeah.
And then the last couple of years, something felt a little different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And there were still lots of great moments. And as I've come to realize through therapy, and I was so, my number one fear in life was divorce, because that happened at such a significant moment in my life that resulted in the loss of my family. It resulted in the loss of my home. And I just said, I'm never going to make that mistake, quote unquote mistake. And so it just wasn't an option. Mm-hmm. And so when things were feeling not right, I just sort of was like, everything's okay. Mm-hmm. There's no problems. Yeah. This is all unconscious. Mm-hmm. But I missed something. And, and she came home one day and essentially said, like, I don't want our house. I don't want kids. I don't know if I want to be married, and I'm in love with someone else. And I was like, it was the shock of my life. Yeah. And, everybody she has her own experience of it, and it's not a judgment as to what happened or, but from my end, I was just blindsided by it, and I wanted to try to save it, and asked, can we go to therapy, and we did, but we didn't get there. Yeah. And tried really hard, and didn't. I mean, the amazing thing about therapy is I feel like the image in my mind is like there's just like all of this stuff all over the floor. There's like all these shapes, and then there's this big shelf in front of you that has a spot for all those shapes, and you're just like picking stuff off the floor and you're putting it in the spot, and then you finally pick up the last piece and you get to look at the picture. And we decided to get divorced in our therapist's office because we put that last piece, and it was like, oh, this doesn't work. And then that triggered the loss of my house, and just like my parents, like we had never fought. Like my parents never fought. They had one fight and then they got divorced. We never fought, and not that we had one fight and got divorced, but it just was like it was on and then it was off, and then I lost that. I lost, also like it was also kind of like her family was my family too, and then our house, and so I just was kind of living in the number one thing that this hell that I had wanted to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that, like, maybe having some kind of emotional check-in with your partner would have helped with, furthering that connection. And I mean, I came across this app called Lasting that I actually spoke about in the episode last week. And it's honestly like very helpful when it comes to dating. It actually brings some clarity to your relationship and allows the two of you to get to know each other on a little bit of a deeper level, because it encourages you to talk about things that you don't totally know how to talk about. Like maybe it's your sex life, maybe it's your career, how you're saying, like, not totally being happy with where your life is at, but how you communicate that to your partner. And the app Lasting actually fits in with your busy schedule. It only takes about 5 minutes to complete a session. And if you're long distance or on your super busy schedule, you can actually compare your session with your partner every time via the app. And it's a relationship counseling app. I mean, we all could use some of that. And sometimes, seeking actual counseling is not possible, but Lasting is free to download, and you can go to the iTunes store today and download the Lasting app to take the free relationship health assessment. And Let's Talk About It listeners can actually unlock the entire app and get your first month of Lasting premium for just 99 cents by visiting getlasting.com/Taylor and using the offer code Taylor. Again, you can always download the app for free, but you must visit GETLASTING.com/Taylor and use the offer code during checkouts. Get your first month for just 99 cents. We need to just keep talking about our relationships and talking about the hard stuff. And I really appreciate you being here today, Peter, to talk about the stuff that's really, really hard. So I remember you talking a little bit about it at Fireside, but where, it felt like you were this like failure,
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can touch a little bit on like what your self-talk was during that time and how you've kind of coped with that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like I had, we both know we're giant Brene Brown fans here.
Yes.
And Brene Brown, like if there's something that you don't like about somebody else, it's because you got to look at that piece of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I carried so much judgment towards divorced people. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, they must be angry, or what's wrong with them? And I remember my old neighbor, he had gotten divorced, and we were friends and everything, but like if I'm honest, like I was like, oh, he must have this anger or something or whatever.
Or like he didn't try hard enough. Or,
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And then I became divorce guy. And I was like, oh, wow. This is how it can happen. Mm-hmm. But my negative self-talk was really negative. Just some negatives, when you use it twice, it makes it a positive, but this is just like negative on negative. So
it's just like negative on negative.
It's not a double negative. It's a super negative. Mm-hmm. So, I did have this sense of being a failure and just like the word is disorientation. I was so disoriented. Yeah. It's funny, I recorded a live concert about a month after, and I watched the footage from that, and I can't watch it because it's like I was on happy pills or something, like the reality had not sunk in, and I was speaking so eloquently, like I had processed everything, and it's totally okay, and this happens, and really, like, my world was crumbling, and I just was like, I'm dealing with this so well. Mm-hmm. And then one day it just hit me, and that was an experience.
Yeah. How did you know that it hit you? What did that look like?
There's been many moments where it's hit me, but one of the moments for sure was the very last moment I had in my house. And, I can't overstate how much that house meant to me. It was a hair behind losing my marriage. Like that house, I took the loss of my childhood home. I took the loss of, my grandparents selling their cottage that they'd had for 38 years. I took the loss of every home I'd ever known, and I put it in every fiber of that house. Yeah. And I loved that house. And so on the last day, I put the last thing in my car and I was driving away. Before I did, I sat down at my piano and in the living room, and I just played. And I actually hit record on my phone. I've never listened to it since because I wonder what it sounds like. But I just played and I cried like while I was singing and playing, and I just processed my feelings through playing. And I don't know, I played for 20 minutes. I don't know if I played for an hour. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that was just such a tremendous moment of loss. And that was the beginning of where am I going? Like, being behind the wheel and wondering, like, because I had this month where I actually had nowhere to live, and so I ended up doing some shows, and I ended up staying at this. My old manager's wife's parents had this cottage in the woods, and I went there for a bit. But I was like, where am I going? And I would just have all these moments of just being hit with, where is my life? What happened? And I still get hit with those moments sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that you said to me before when we were getting lunch that really stuck out to me and was something I already wanted to bring up, just knowing your career and knowing that it's something in everyone's everyday life that we struggle with, but living with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that not only like being a musician, your life is living with uncertainty.
Yeah.
But then also in our personal lives, like, we really don't know. Like, I think even when we're not dealing with like very traumatic, like heavy situations, like how you just shared, that oftentimes we are always asking ourselves, like, what are we doing? What's going to happen? Like, where are we going?
Yeah.
What's even the point?
Right.
Like, we ask ourselves these questions, and
Definitely.
It's really uncomfortable to sit with that uncertainty. And it sounds like you had like just the most extreme amount of uncertainty at this point in your life.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, just to tie back also to the work I do with the youth, I don't like calling them kids because they're teenagers, and I didn't like anybody calling me a kid when I was 15. So the students, the youth, whatever they are, wonderful beings. So much of that process is I have no right to call myself a mentor or to stand up there in like role of teacher if I don't live what I say. And, you know, the main theme that we talk about at Faces is integrity. So like this like alignment of your thoughts, feelings, and actions around true principles. And so dealing like the tools that I try to instill in the youth, I had to approach my own biggest challenge with those same tools. And it was almost annoying because I was like, oh, I can't just rage and be a mess about that. I mean, I'm allowed to like be upset, but I was like, oh, I actually have to deal with this properly because then I can't go back next summer and encourage them to like sit with your discomfort and feel your feelings and process it and talk about it and share and don't isolate yourself. When all I wanted to do was isolate myself and run away from it or go drink everything I could get my hands on. I was like, oh, I can't do that because then I can't show up next summer. And so
the youth were holding you accountable.
They were like really.
Yeah. And that's so important, honestly, to have someone or multiple people to hold you accountable with 100%. The kind of interpersonal work that you're doing. That's such an important piece.
Yeah. And the people that I work with there, you know, they became some of my best friends and they became my support network. And they were the ones that said to me, hey, Peter, you know, we've been coming to your shows for all these years. We've seen what you do with youth. You could turn what you do into a talk. And the first talk that I created with the help of my friend Dave, who's one of the creators of this program, this talk is called Why I Seek Discomfort.
I love it. I love it.
And so he's the one that helped me shape that. And the whole premise of that talk is, you know, this thing that I do of getting up on a stage and singing songs I wrote about my heart in a bedroom in a dark room full of strangers. That's a terrible idea. Like that's fundamentally a bad idea when it comes to vulnerability and discomfort. Yeah. It's just a fundamentally vulnerable thing to do that. Yeah. But through the process of getting up on stage over 1,000 times and putting myself in that vulnerable place, it's led to this career and all these experiences and meeting these students and talking at Fireside and all these things by just standing in front of that microphone. Yeah,
and really touching people like in very emotional places.
Right. Well,
I was so touched.
Well, thank you. But it's funny how like that, because I talk about it, because like the genesis of it is I have to live it. And so I have to have those hard conversations. Yeah. I have to face those hard things. If I'm, if I don't do that, then it's like I know too much. I know that I'm not doing what I really want to be doing, what I should be doing, what's going to be best for me, what is in my own integrity. So it's just weird how kind of life gives you those things that you need. And, you know, I started at Faces like 5 years ago. And then my divorce happened 2 years after that. So just as I kind of really got into that, then I needed those tools that I was teaching. And then as I went through the divorce and all of a sudden, like part of I didn't want to be playing 150 shows a year anymore. I always wanted to like be a musician, but I wanted to kind of be home a little more so that I could take care of my mental health and that I could, you know, I know that me being away that much did not help my relationship. And I was like, I don't want that to happen again. And so, you know, and then out of doing that work with Faces, that's where my speaking career started coming out of it too. And that speaking career has allowed me to be more balanced and not say yes to every musical opportunity because I have alternate income sources. Yeah. And just like, you know, when I was talking about at Faces, it's this job that I feel perfectly qualified for that I didn't know exists. Like I didn't know that you could give talks and have that be a career. And now it's a huge part of my career. Yeah. And that connection that I crave with human beings, it in some ways, it's almost like it's like the ultimate format. Because in a music show, it's like, well, is your latest single doing well? And, you know, where are you in your album cycle? And like, are you the coolest person on the block? I mean, I don't totally play that game, but there's always...
There's an element of that in order to be like, quote unquote, successful as a musician.
Whereas when I'm speaking with people, the whole premise is, hey, we're going to come here and try to feel something. I'm like, perfect. Let's do that.
Let me tell you, you make people feel some things.
Well, thanks.
But one of my favorite parts, both me and Vanessa loved, was how you incorporated both of those in your keynote. That you know, you were sharing your story, you were being vulnerable, you were leaning into the discomfort of it all. But then you were also incorporating your music, and that was like you would tell like bits and pieces of a story, and then you would play a song and like the song, just let it like all really sink in. And that was when Vanessa and I just like would lose it the most. Just sobbing. Well, it's beautiful in a beautiful, like in a very like therapeutic, like very connecting kind of way.
Right. Well, thanks. Well, I you know, I've always had this fantasy as a writer that I'll like wake up one morning and there'll be a book next to me that's just full of songs that I wrote, like just full of lyrics, but like so I don't have to keep writing. I mean, I love writing, but it's also like really hard. But in a way, all the, you know, the 300 songs or whatever that I have written, they kind of are fulfilling that in my speaking career because there's so much love and care that I've put into every one of those songs, no matter what I'm talking about. I have a song that I've written about that. And so I get to kind of reverse engineer the songs, like, oh, like about vulnerability or whatever. Yeah, I've got 20 of those. Like, what's the perfect song? And then what's the story behind that? And all of a sudden, like, I can kind of craft my talk around the songs that I'm going to use to anchor. So it's like I do have that book full of things that I've written that just happen to be called my songs. You know? So,
I love that. And there was one piece of your speech that I would love for you to share with listeners, and I would love to listen to again. But there was a piece where you talked about the kitchen floor.
Oh, yeah.
And I will share that I think the kitchen floor is one of the places I think I have some of my most vulnerable moments. Like when you said that, it hit me so hard because I was like, yes, my kitchen floor. Like, that's where I go. And there was actually a session with a client a few years back where it was the anniversary of her partner's suicide. And it was a very, very deep day. And it was kind of like, how do we want to process this? And she had just been go all day. She hadn't really taken a second to even let it sit in. And, you know, when she was kind of like, I just feel like I need to just kind of have a breakdown. Like I need to just have a meltdown. And I was like, okay, what does that look like for you? And she was like, just like crying on my kitchen floor.
Really?
And I was like, yeah. So it was like the most vulnerable I had ever been in a therapy session with a client. And even after that session, it was like, thank God that was the last session of the day. Cause I was like, oh, like that hit me. And like we sat on the floor together and like she just let it all out and we just had a moment. It was a whole thing. But when you said that, I was just like, the kitchen floor, like that is where you feel some shit.
It's true.
So tell us about your kitchen floor.
Oh, my kitchen floor. Well, I walked into my kitchen, and in my talk, I think I say my friend, but it was actually my ex-wife. But I always feel like if I say ex-wife, it's just going to send people off on another tangent. And
but we have some backstory now.
Yeah, you have some backstory, so it makes sense. But I said to my wife at the time, you know, I had been, at that point, I'd been touring about 7-8 years and doing 150 shows a year. A lot of those shows were to know people, sleeping on floors. And I just said the words, I said, it's not working. And as I said those words, it's not working, all of that energy that I had been using to like keep up the walls and say, yeah, everything's great. I'm doing great. Like just the sort of the lie, not that it's a lie, but the truth of what it really felt like inside of me. You know, despite some people from the outside thinking, oh, you're doing great. but I knew the reality of it. I knew the numbers that, I knew what needed to happen and what wasn't happening. But so all of that energy to try to like keep everything looking great, just the dam broke. And I just collapsed to collapsed to the floor. And as I just said, it's not working. And I said that multiple times. And as I said those words, I just cried like, I don't know I've ever cried like that in my life. It was just so much the fear, the disappointment, the frustration, the self-doubt, just all of the protective barriers that allow you to be a functional human being disappeared. And I just cried like so hard.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was over. I felt like I had failed, like it was just, and it was my whole identity too,
Yeah.
It's, especially when you're an artist, it's your key to the world. It's the way people interact with you. At least that's how I perceived it. I guess I still kind of perceive it that way. I'm trying to also see myself as somebody who just has value and exists, whether people are clapping for me on stage or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that was a moment. And like I said in my talk, that moment was also a couple of weeks before I walked out on stage at that show in Fort McLeod, and turns out that my music had been used for this program and I had no idea. So that was happening at the same time as I thought that
it wasn't working.
Which is kind of amazing.
Yeah. The universe working in its beautiful way that it does.
Yeah.
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 Oh, man. I think all of what you just said is you're so not alone in any of that. And I know you know that. I think no matter what career anyone is in, that's something that we can all relate to, that feeling of like, holy shit, something's not right anymore. Like something's not working. And I love how you describe like having those walls of making everyone think that everything's okay. I'm doing good. I'm doing great. That, there are people who like, that's their whole thing. I'm sure there's someone listening right now who's like, that's their thing, is they're the person that always has it together.
Yeah.
They're the strong one. They're the one that's really successful. And that there's this feeling of like, you can't break.
Right.
You can't feel it. And if you do, you're weak and you're a failure.
Right.
And you should be ashamed.
Right.
And that's why I always encourage, like, feel all the feelings. Like, as Brene Brown says, as the Queen Brene says, you can't selectively numb.
Yeah.
You can't
That's
just
so
numb
true.
the negative feelings, or the feelings, I don't like saying negative feelings, the red feelings, or the feelings that are really uncomfortable. You can't do that, because when you do that, you're also numbing things like joy and love. And we don't want to be living in a society of numbness, or we don't want to have a life of numb. And how are we feeling connected to each other? And that's so important in our lives. And I just so appreciated all of your vulnerability, not only in the talk, but then also just in like your everyday life that you have, and even talking on here, because it does allow for people to feel connected to you. And I think it also is a healing thing for everyone when we share, and when we allow someone else to feel connected to us, it I think increases our connection within ourselves.
100%. Yeah. And that's part of the struggle sometimes. Like I said this in my talk, I'm like, it's not good for my ticket sales to talk about crying on my kitchen floor, or it's like, it's not sort of something that you kind of Instagram when you're like crying on the floor, but like people, so sometimes I feel like I'm contributing to the sense of isolation that people have by not sharing that, which is why I was, happy to come on this podcast with you too, because most interviews that I do, I'm talking about how great my show is and you should come, or how great the new album is, or like all of these things. But that ends up creating this kind of inner sense of like I'm two people.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like this weird like facade.
But you're isolated from yourself, and so there's not as much of a place to.
Yeah. So I know we're talking about, a little bit of heartbreak, some divorce, how difficult relationships can be, not only with ourselves, but with other people. And just take a second here to acknowledge where like relationships sometimes are super fulfilling and they're moving in really positive directions. And maybe one of you listening is engaged and maybe you're even planning a wedding. So if you are one of those people, I want to introduce you guys to Zola for a quick little break. And share with you guys that they are like the wedding company that will actually do anything for love. It is one of the easiest ways to plan your wedding and register. Everything is conveniently online and in one place. You can actually start with a free wedding website. It's so easy. And you can actually put your Zola registry on your wedding website so guests can get all the details they need and can actually buy your wedding gifts in one convenient and, of course, beautiful place. Lola makes registering for newlywed life so easy, and I only hope I can relate to this one day. But guests, honestly, they love the free shippings and returns. You can register for gift cards with your favorite brands like Delta, Southwest, Hulu, Home Depot, and they also have the best completion discount, 20% off remaining gifts on your registry starting right after your big day. However, to start your free wedding website and also get $50 off your registry on Zola, go to zola.com/Taylor. That's ZOLA.com/Taylor. And really embrace the happiness of your beautiful day. And in planning it, you know, it's a really positive, great thing that you got going on for you. And I wonder too, I mean, first of all, I always love when people are just like very in touch with their emotions and they allow themselves to feel all the feelings.
Yeah.
And that's why I was so drawn to you. I was like, we need to talk more. We need to be BFFs. But you're also a man. And typically that's not something that men do. In fact, men are oftentimes shamed when they have that experience.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you can touch a little bit on like how, if at all, you've noticed that play a part in how you are expressive emotionally.
Right.
Like maybe if there was any kind of like mental process when you put those walls down to say it's not working and allowed yourself that moment. Maybe it wasn't even necessarily allowing yourself the moment because it just happened.
Yeah.
But if there were layers of that were like, you're the man you're her husband, you know, you got to keep it together. Right. Like if there was any of that, or if you've like experienced any of that in your life.
What's interesting, like even just the fact that I don't say in like when I'm my talk, I don't say like I walked in the kitchen and said to my wife, it's not working. The reason I say it's a friend, I don't say my wife or my ex-wife. I don't say that because of what I already said is that I just don't want people to like, oh, ex-wife, you got divorced, like just, you know, go off on some tangent. But also truthfully, I've never like admitted this, but I think I feel like it's part of me feels embarrassed that like that I did that in front of my wife and that or ex-wife, and that people would be like, oh, that's why she divorced him, you know? Like, that's kind of the judgment train that I go down, is like,
that people would judge your capabilities as a husband.
Yeah, and just that, you know, like, get it together, man, you know? Like, and it's interesting. Although, you know, I've also, like, I've had, like, girls that I, you know, dated or friends said to me like, you're more of a woman than I'll ever be. Like that's like, as in like you're way more emotional than I am. Like, but I guess there's kind of judgment in that too, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
there absolutely is. I mean, it might be like an undertone, but that's definitely there.
But yeah, I definitely, I think I'm just prone to emotion, like since I was a little kid, and my mom was a therapist, and so there's an openness around it. It sounds like was encouraged for sure, but I definitely, I would be lying if I said I didn't like judge myself for that weakness. I mean, just
which isn't a weakness.
I know, exactly that perceived weakness. You know, 100%. And I mean, I get up on stage, and I basically try to get people to connect and feel things. That's my MO. That's what I built my career on. But it's easy to play the role of getting people to feel things and then maybe not
Having that wall up a little bit.
Yeah, having a wall up a bit. And like, if I'm totally honest, like these last few weeks for me have been really challenging, and from an outside perspective, like my album just got mastered, and I've got like an amazing team of people that are working with me now, and like about a week ago I had a sleepless night anxiety attack, and last night I had another like kitchen floor moment, and I haven't had a moment like that in a long time, and I was with my girlfriend, and I just was like, I'm not quite keeping it together right here, you know, and I was embarrassed in front of her, and to her credit, she was just so loving and warm and kind, and the thing that really kind of made me kind of break down and cry was just how understanding she was. Yeah. Like when I looked in her eyes and she was just present with me and wasn't judging me, that's what made me, it's like she was saying, it's okay.
Yeah. She like opened the door to say.
Yeah. Cause I was sort of like, you know, I had my hands in my head, and I just was like, just feeling just this sense of like, there's so much pressure coming at me. Yeah. And then I just like, I opened my eyes and I looked at her, and she just was pure love. And then I lost it. And,
and how did that feel?
I feel way better, you know, but though there is a part of me that's just scared that she would judge me for that, or that anybody would judge. I'm kind of shocked that I'm just saying this all to you, but I guess that's what we're doing. And,
I appreciate you sharing it, and I can very much relate.
Yeah.
I think we both, especially as of late, have had a lot of pressure on ourselves and from other people, and there's just so many things going on. And I think we both have been very like go, 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 go.
Yeah, yeah.
And very small moments to ourselves. And that's where like, you know, when we first got together today, talking about the bubbles of calmness, to really just be present in each thing, in each moment. And that's another thing that Brene talks about is like perfectionism, that's one of the vulnerability armors that we use is this like busy bee image, you know, and how important it is to actually take that time for self-care, which, you know, we did an episode on a while back, but also can be misconstrued in so many different ways, but like actual genuine, like letting yourself feel the feelings of it all. And I'm really happy that like, you had the support to do that last night, but also that like you put yourself out there to receive that support. And that you like, let yourself feel it.
Yeah. I mean, I needed to, you know, it was like a sickness inside of me, you know, like I just felt like, whoa, I've just been carrying this tension, and I guess it was just admitting it too. Like, hey, I'm, you know, the night when I was sort of having this kind of anxiety attack all night, like it was like 7:30 in the morning. I was still awake. I had not slept. And that day I had to drive 5 hours, play a gig, and drive back. I had to drive 10 hours and play this gig. And
holy shit.
So it was like 7:30 in the morning. I knew I had to leave my house at 10 a.m. So, and then I was going to be driving for 10 hours. So I literally thought I was going to like die or something if I didn't get some sleep. Yeah. And so I didn't want to bother anybody, but I sent an email to my brother and to my friend, who's one of the people, she's the therapist who helped create the Faces program. And the two of them have been such great supports for me. And I sent them an email at like 7:30 in the morning. I said, I just need to tell somebody I'm having a moment and I'm not okay. And I'm going to be okay. Like, you don't need to worry about anything crazy happening, but I just need to tell somebody that amidst all of these amazing things that are happening, I'm struggling. And I sent that email and I fell asleep. And then they both, you know, called me that day and And I just felt way better that I could share that. And it's obviously my brother and my friend, she's literally saved my life. Like I have just such a rapport with trust with them that I don't feel like it's going to negatively affect their mental health or it's going to trigger them anyway. They can just kind of hold that space for me. And I think you need to find those people that can hold that space for you, because it's not everyone, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. As Brene says, you share your story with people who've earned the right.
Yeah, exactly.
So a little off subject, but kind of a fun fact. I'm very particular when it comes to dating and like hygiene. And I mean, the average person actually only brushes for about 45 to 70 seconds when the recommended brushing time for your teeth is actually 2 minutes. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves when I date someone, that like maybe they don't actually brush their teeth for the full 2 minutes, because this is important stuff. And I want to share with you guys that the Burst Sonic Toothbrush has built-in 2-minute timer to help you actually reach that magical number. And this sonic toothbrush, the Burst Sonic Toothbrush, is actually best known for its charcoal-infused super soft bristles. And the charcoal actually removes surface stains and is an antimicrobial, which actually helps keep the bristles hygienic for the lifetime of the brush head. But also, you can get each brush comes with a Burst subscription replacement head, and so that actually sends you a new brush head every 3 months for just $6 each. So not only is the actual toothbrush head itself helping clean, you're sticking on time with the 2-minute magic number for good hygiene when you're dating. I always keep a lookout for that. Maybe that's a little weird, but you guys can go to burstoralcare.com to get your Burst Sonics toothbrush today. And with the Burst subscription program, you'll get a new replacement head every 3 months for just $6 each. If you use my code at checkout, Taylor, you'll also get 10% off your order. That's burstoralcare.com with code Taylor for 10% off. Don't miss out on this special offer. This is also a super great gift idea, especially if you're dating someone and you notice they're using a toothbrush that does not time and they're not actually brushing for the 2 full minutes. Like, get your teeth clean. Go to burstoralcare.com and don't forget to use my code Taylor. Now, that was just a little off topic, but I want to get back to our show. But I find it interesting at the beginning of that you said, you know, you didn't want to bother anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we talk about almost every episode with guests, that we all have this like concern of being a burden when we reach out to say that we're not doing okay.
Yeah.
And I love even how you said it. Like, literally, I feel like I'm listening to myself talk, because that's the exact same thing I'll do. I'll say, you know, I'm not okay.
Right.
Like, I'm having a moment.
Right.
Like, and I need to just let myself be in this moment. And I know that the next moment will get better. And each moment will feel better as I allow myself to, you know, practice some self-compassion and feel the feelings I'm feeling. And I do know rationally I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Not in this moment. And I'm going to allow for that.
Yeah.
But then I will be.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you communicated that, and then, you know, immediately just felt this sense of like relief, it sounds like, and we're able to silence all of that and actually get some rest.
It was incredible, you know? Yeah, like as soon as I sent those notes, I also sent a note to Blake, the guy who I spoke with
who will hopefully come on the show, and we'll be able to talk about thankfulness with him.
Yeah. So, you know, as soon as I reached out to kind of that core people, but even then with each of those 3 people, I didn't like, there was so many voices in my head that were telling me, don't do that. You know, like with my brother, I was like, oh, like then my whole family's going to be worried. And then every time I go home, like, you know, like there was a whole reason not to do that. Yeah. And then with my friend Joss, you know, who I work with at Faces, I was like, whoa, I won't get to go work with the kids again because they're going to think I'm not stable. And I had this whole narrative. And then with Blake, I was like, well, we work together and we do these talks together sometimes. And I was like, oh, this is
going to be unprofessional.
It's going to be unprofessional of me. And of course.
So how do you talk through back to each of those voices, or how do you move past that negative self-talk that's discouraging you or shaming you to not share?
Well, that's a good question. Feel? So part of what we do at Faces is we really kind of talk about like thoughts, feelings, and actions, and the connection between those three things. And when you're in flow, you're kind of, everything is just moving, like we use the analogy of like a basketball player, just, they're playing the game. They're not thinking of strategy. It's just, they're just in flow and they go and they do the layup or the slam dunk or whatever. It's just, so when you're out of flow, it's like one of those things are out of whack. Either you're trapped in thought or you're lost in feelings, or, often it's like inaction is what happens. You kind of get bogged down in one of those two. And so often the way to reboot the system is just putting the action first. And so like we use the image, like we actually take the students rappelling. So they go down this giant rock wall. And of course their thoughts are like, I'm going to die. Like I can calculate that.
That would be me.
Yeah. And then their feelings are just out of control.
Yeah. Terrified.
But if they just put the action first and just take a step, then by taking that step, you're like, oh, I didn't die.
Yeah.
I still have all these thoughts and these feelings, and you take another step. Oh, I didn't die. And then so we sort of have this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule, which is like basically in those 5 seconds where you're thinking about the action, you just do the action.
You could have done it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you just do the action, and what often happens, like I've run hundreds of kids through the rappel now. By the time they're like halfway down, they're loving it, and they were crying and screaming and wanting to go home like 10 minutes earlier, and now or a minute earlier, and now they want to go up and do it again.
Yeah.
So I kind of, in my brain, I there was all these reasons for me not to send it, but I knew that I just had to send it, and so it's like sort of close your eyes and just hit send, and
just close your eyes and hit send.
Yeah, and then I fell asleep, and. That's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, putting the action first sometimes is helpful.
Yeah. I love that you're part of this program. It sounds super, super interesting.
Well, it helps me.
Yeah. Like I'm happy to have it for you, and I'm also happy that like the students have you there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, Canada's great. You guys do great things up here. Before we kind of wrap up here, one thing I want to ask you, and it's in a way maybe kind of like a little homework thing, like a little assignment thing. Typically, actually, what I would do, I haven't done it a lot on the pod, but whenever a friend calls me and we have like, this deep conversation, and I'm like being a friendipist is what we call it, session, I'll always kind of wrap it up or leave it with like, okay, so like, where do you go from here, know? And knowing that this has been like a super stressful time for you and a lot of pressure, and, you had your moment just last night. You came into our hangout today talking about sitting with these bubbles of calmness. And I think that's a really great tool to use going forward with all the pressure and stress. And certainly some of that stuff is situational and will go away and be resolved soon. But like, how do you take care of yourself the rest of the week?
That is a good question. Well, because I have a talk that I'm giving tomorrow for the Canadian Cancer Society, so there's been a lot of like preparation and stuff. But my girlfriend and I are going to take Saturday off, which is going to be my first day off in a long time, and we're going to go for a hike and just be out in the woods. And it kind of worked out really well because the talk for the Canadian Cancer Society is up at this retreat center. Okay. And we had wanted to go camping this weekend, but as you can tell, it's quite cold. It's cold here, guys. I landed and I was like, I'm ready to go back to Seattle. It's actually warmer there. So anyway, but the guy, I had a meeting with him last night just to kind of overview what I was going to do. And he's like, hey, by the way, we have these cabins and you and your girlfriend can just have one if you guys want to hang out. And so amazing. So it's kind of just fell into my lap. So the universe was like, you need some self-care time. Yeah. Here's a cabin. And my girlfriend is amazing at like, she's just incredible at living in the moment and kind of finding that balance and that self-care and so she's a good influence on me for sure. So good. Yeah. I'm really happy that you found her. Yeah, and I feel like there's I'm one of those people that like I'm super diligent with like going to the gym and eating really well and all those things and all of that is self-care. Yeah. But it's also like super efficient, it's like it's still like trying to win at everything. And so Although I have kind of shifted my gym thing a little bit, where the last month, especially when it's been so busy, no matter what's happening in my life, I never stop going to the gym. I just decided that, Barack Obama would work out every morning, and one of my favorite Canadian politicians, his name is Jack Layton, and he passed away. But some of the busiest people on earth, they don't compromise that part of their routine, and so I know I don't compromise that. So I've been having this moment where right before I walk into the gym, I'm like, this is for me. And then I enjoy it so much, and it, people always try to get me join running clubs or I'm like, no. I have no mandate. I don't want to train for something and then achieve it and then stop doing it. It's this is therapy for me. This is self-care. But still, I feel like I need this other layer of time where I'm just focused on
just being.
Just being, exactly. Just being. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of like the difference between going for a walk or going for a run. Obviously your run is great and you feel awesome. Yeah. But when you go for a walk, there's just a different pace. There's a different mindset to it. There's just a different comfort to it. And so I need to go for more walks.
Yeah. I like that you say that. This is for me.
Yeah.
I think that's a good reminder to literally verbally even say to yourself before going into doing anything self-care wise. I can picture myself stepping into a bubble bath. This is for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you have this cabin coming up and your time to just be. And then you also get to share it with your partner. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
If people want to contact you, if they want to see you, where can they find you, Peter?
Well, I'm on the interwebs.
Yeah.
At Peter Katz Music. And in Canadian, it's Katz or Katz. Katz is American. Katz is Canadian. So
okay, yeah.
So Peter Katz Music, peterkatz.com.
And you're gonna have a new album coming out. So by the time this is released, his album will come out a few weeks after that.
A few months. Yeah. So I just finished it.
Okay.
But it's I feel like it's the album of my lifetime. I'm so proud of it, and I worked on it for 3 years. So we're going to set it up really properly. So it'll be out in 2019, but
perfect.
I don't know exactly when. But it's
well, follow him on Instagram, and I'll put the links to his website and some really cool videos. One that you said was super cool was you did a cover of Halo by Beyonce. So
Queen Bee.
Beehive listening, check the link in the episode descriptions. And I'll put all kinds of fun links there for people to check you out. But thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to. I don't want to stop talking.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah.
And you did a great job too.
Oh, thank you. So did you. And that does it for our show today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys can check out all the things we talked about today of Peter in the episode description. So check out those notes. And please feel free to leave a review on iTunes and give us some feedback. Let me know what you're liking about the show. And if there are topics that you guys want to see covered, feel free to send an email at ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I cannot wait to talk with you guys some more next week.
This podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Babes and Babies, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.